Mhm. Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy to see my guests. 1 second. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy to see my guests. Mr. Reinhard Kluchik, who is serving as the Secretary General of the European Union, Austrian Division. Good evening, Mr. Kluchik.
Good evening. Dobry wieczór.
Mr. Günther Fechlinger, who is an activist, the chairman of Europeans for Tax Reforms, member of the Vienna Goes Europe organization, civil activist. Mr. Günther, thank you very much for joining us today.
So happy to be here.
And also today's event will be joined by our friend, Mr. Dietmar Pichler, who is programmatic director of the Center for Media Literacy in Vienna. Okay, now he's joining us. Okay, so colleagues, yeah, Mr. Pichler joined us. Okay, colleagues, so I'm very happy that you accept my invitation to speak about anniversary of Russian invasion. So we are heading towards anniversary of Russian invasion of Ukraine, and obviously now many people, many experts, they are let's say talking about the prerequisites of this invasion and discussing possibilities. Could this invasion be omitted or not? So let's talk about this. So let's start with you, Mr. Kluchik. 1 year since Russian invasion, could you predict that there will be a full-scale war between Russia and Ukraine back in the beginning of 2022, when there were many publications about this?
I personally did not believe in a full-scale war, to be honest, because it is completely abnormal to do that. Yeah, I mean, this is not rational to start a war because of many reasons. But this is the interesting thing. I've been in contact with many friends in Ukraine, and they all said Russia is going to start a war. We don't know when, but it's coming for sure. So I should have listened much more to the Ukrainian friends.
Mr. Fechlinger, could you foresee that, let's say, this war will be a long-lasting war?
Thanks for the invitation. I went to 1 year ago, exactly 1 year ago, on February 2022, I went to Mariupol, to this very special and unique city, and I called for the Europeans and NATO to protect that city, because the attack on Mariupol was quite clear already for everybody to see, because there was a massive armed troop of invasion from Russia already mobilized. And I put my NATO flag and my European flag in Mariupol on the street, and I said, protect this city. But Europe didn't protect it. And now we have genocide and terrible, monstrous, heinous crimes committed by the Russians in that great city, and the population is devastated. And this is a crime which will live in infamy forever in history. And I call to liberate Mariupol, and we should liberate it now with NATO arms, with weapons for Ukraine, with massive intervention by the West to liberate, because otherwise we will have a very long war. And do you want a long war? Does anybody want this war to continue for years and years? It's better we win it, and we win it fast. We win it this year, and we win it by massive support for Ukraine, fiscally, financially, and industrial, and of course with weapons.
Mr. Pichler, I remember very well the situation a year ago, because we had interviews, I interviewed other people, and to be honest with you, I was the one among many people who actually campaigned an idea that what Western media were doing were a fake dissemination. Different reasons to threaten Russia, to boost the popularity of Mr. Biden, to boost the popularity of Mr. Zelensky, etc., etc., etc. So I was convinced that this was, kind of information operation, as we now say in Ukraine, which West was doing to prevent Russian invasion or for some other reason. But after the war started, all of a sudden we understood that all these maps, which were published by US media, so they were completely right. And Russia actually invaded Ukraine from different sides, from south, north, from east, etc. So my question to you will be the following. You are the specialist in this media accuracy field. Why we, or okay, not everybody, why such people as me, yeah, and I hope that I'm not the dumbest one, we were sure that these were fakes. So maybe this is the problem, because we still can't distinguish between fakes and reality.
Well, thank you for the invitation, and good evening, everybody. I think there is a certain kind of disbelief in things that, first of all, we cannot predict the future. You can never predict the future. So if you say, for instance, in 1 month, this or that will happen, nobody knows. Yeah. So some things are maybe more likely or less likely. And this is actually what we are discussing now. So back then, if we speak about the situation, about the media, and about all the things we heard, it was still not sure that it's going to happen, because you can stop everything one day before it starts. Yeah, so it was, at that moment, it was very likely and highly likely, and we saw that it was correct. Unfortunately, it happened. I think there is, you cannot blame yourself that you didn't believe, because many people thought it cannot happen, it's not logical, and we see now the results. And I myself, I saw that this scenario is possible, but until the last day, I hope that it will not happen. So I think it's impossible. I think we have a lot of speculation today from all sides, what is going to happen tomorrow or in 1 week or 1 month. And we need to be clear, no matter on which side we are, that we don't know what the future brings. We can at least try to have an opinion what scenarios are likely or less likely, but nobody knows exactly what is happening tomorrow, because decisions, even a decision that is made, can be cancelled. So I think no blame on that. So I understand everybody, and of course the emotional, if you're emotionally involved, personally involved, it's a completely different situation.
Thank you, Mr. Kloch. Before the war, obviously there were some people who argued that Putin is going to invade Ukraine. After Ukraine, he's going to invade Moldova, Georgia, restore Soviet Union. Always there are people who, let's say, try to pursue the most radical scenarios. Why? Because when you campaign the most radical scenario, you boost your popularity, you boost your monetization, you attract donation, you attract, media coverage, etc., etc. Because it's very hard to be popular, and it's very hard to attract media coverage if you are talking about some, let's say, usual things, So you have to talk radical things. But the situation actually revealed that these people who were a strong supporter of the most radical scenarios, they won. Like those people who actually published different books in the end of the 70s, which stipulated that Soviet Union is going to collapse. It was fantastic, but now we, go through these headings and we say, wow, these people were sure that Soviet Union is going to collapse. How could they predict? Awesome people. So why do you think actually this scenario actually worked out? Because, politics is like football game, this is not only Putin, this is the play, this is the game of Western parts, Ukraine, etc., etc., etc. So how we end up in such full-scale war.
Once again, I didn't understand the last sentence.
How we end up in the full-scale war.
So the question is, why did we end up in this full-scale war?
Yeah.
Well,
not only why, but how. Yeah.
I mean, we ended up in this full-scale war because most people in the West did not believe that it would end up in such a full-scale war. So Putin was on the side, the surprise was on his side. Although there were many, as you mentioned, many analysts who said, take care, he could start this war, he prepared his military, etc., etc. He had already started a hybrid war on disinformation campaigns in Europe, tried to get influence into parties, pro-Russian parties, etc., etc. So all these things were there and we could see it. But nobody in the West, or only a few people in the West, wanted to believe that such a war is possible. The most politicians in the West believe, or at that time believed in international agreements, in international law, and all these laws that war is forbidden. So we are not having a war in Europe because Russia was seen as a part of this European space. And so finally, all those people were surprised, but, and this is the good part of this surprise, finally, we could see that they are united against these Russian aggressions, except some politicians and also some governments which are, let's say, not on the right side.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Fechlinger, you are a true civil activist in the sense that you put enormous efforts, you travel a lot in order to meet new people, in order to campaign your ideas, let's say, you know. At the end of the day, each job is important, you know. Maybe this was the fault of the West, that West did not, let's say, devote enough time to campaign an idea of, let's say, Russia part of European Union, because we remember Ministry for External Affairs Minister Kozyrev, who is now living in the United States. Back in the beginning of the 90s, he was a strong supporter of idea Russia being part of European Union and being part of NATO. So maybe this is also the fault of the West not to bind Russia close like it used to be in the case of Germany.
Yeah, I know this argument, but I reject it completely, because in the 1990s, it was so much work with the Russian opposition and with the Russian government, and with the West was so engaged. I personally was part of the youth delegation when we participated in the Council of Europe to integrate Russia in the Council of Europe. Also politically in the EPP and in the students, I was very active with the Russian opposition leaders, Nemtsov, Gaidar. I met Gaidar personally in '98. And, you know, there was many efforts, but, you know, we simply lost the Russian Civil War. It was a civil war in '96, not a war in full scale. It happened then in Chechnya, but a political civil war about the Russian future. And we lost it against the KGB clique around Putin. He basically took power and there was very little we could have done. And so we really integrated in trade terms, in economic terms, in the WTO. There was various efforts later as well under Obama to integrate and to be softer and to cooperate, and the reset, I remind you. And until, you know, the last moments, the German and French chancellor went now to basically on their knees in Moscow to plead for peace and to ask Putin what he wants to avoid the war. You know, we really have gone to the maximum in terms of appeasement. We even consisted, you know, that we bought even more energy. 2015 was the year of the Minsk agreement in order to save Ukraine, because that's important. The listeners have to understand the Europeans are not reasonable people. But the idea why we maximum bought the energy from Russia in 2015 by neglecting the Norwegians, by neglecting the Romanians, is very much so that the idea was that Putin accepts to buy more energy and he will not continue to break up and march into Ukraine, because in 2015 he could have easily gone to much further and occupy half of Ukraine. But we did this deal, and this is basically the Nord Stream 2 concept. And so we have appeased him to the maximum, but it was a wrong policy. I always was against it. because what you need to do with evil enemies, you need to confront them and contain them. That means NATO membership for Ukraine, which George W. Bush has always said very clearly. In 2008, we had the opportunity, we had again afterwards, and now in 2015, we should have said, okay, you have two parts of Ukraine, but the rest is under NATO protection, like we did it in Kosovo and Bosnia. We have the external security obligation for Kosovo and Bosnia, and it's the Kosovo National Day today. But we didn't do that. And even we said, no, we will never accept Ukraine in NATO in February 2022. Macron said it in public, Finlandization. And here's the point where Putin then decided, okay, you will not defend it. Let's see, I will crash it. And he crashed it. But he crashed it on all sides, and that was too much for him. And the Ukrainians are a hero, and they were able to defeat him. And now we have to make sure that we win the whole war. And we will never be under the threat of Russia again. This is very important to win. But the reasons are basically that one, that we have not trusted on containment, but on appeasement. And more appeasement than we have done in the last 10 years, it's impossible.
Thank you, Mr. Fechner. Mr. Pichler, you know, I'm not a great fan of the collective responsibility. I think that when we're talking about collective responsibility, we actually undermine the personal responsibility of guilty people. I think you can't talk about collective responsibility, because when we are talking about collective responsibility, it brings us to the basics of fascism, you know. So why I'm talking about this, you know, I'm a strong supporter of Ukraine being part of European Union. Actually, I was a strong supporter of this idea even before it became a mainstream in Ukraine. You know, I don't exaggerate my personal efforts, but let's say I was always with very explicit public position. And to be honest with you, I'm very, very disappointed and very frustrated that we don't want to acknowledge that there are many Russians actually on our side in the European Union. You can, you know, look through LinkedIn and you will see many Russians who occupy different positions, who, you know, created their businesses, who, you know, created their destiny, who pay taxes, who know how democracy works, who observe rules of democracy. But, you know, it seems that Russian opposition totally reject these people, and Westerns as well reject these people. So Westerns don't consider them as an alternative force for Russia. Western try to, let's say, absorb them, but do not consider them as, you know, a separate group of people which can potentially change the face of Russia.
Yeah, I think we need to differentiate, of course. Yeah, on one hand, we have governments, we have propagandists, we have people who are ideology-wise involved, and they support the whole idea of some imperialistical, nationalistic, fascist policy. On the other hand, we have people. And I would also like to distinguish between people who just don't do anything. Yeah, they just say, I want to live my life. I don't connect to politics. Yeah, I think they are somehow also responsible, because this system, of course, it came from one day to the other. I would not attack them, but I would just say, yeah, it's the outcome is not very good. Yeah. And then we have people who actually want to do something, want to help. They supportive of your cause. I see no reason why not to believe them. Yeah, but you need to check, of course. Yeah, because there are some people who just pretend, and you know, everything's quite complicated. We have a lot of spies everywhere in Europe. But I think they are very important, actually, because they provide us not only with support, but also with information that we need. Yeah, because they know more about regime propaganda, they know more about narratives, and they were very educated people about what is actually going on. Yeah, so I'm very pragmatic regarding this. I think that it's totally okay to work with these people, to use these people, and to maybe plan a future also, yeah, more democratic future, more prosperous, more less imperialistic, less. That will take a lot of time, but it's good to organize such movements and not reject them. So I don't believe in anything like genes, yeah, because, you know, all people are mixed, yeah, especially in the so-called former USSR, yeah. So there was never any ethnic thing, yeah. So sometimes not even passports matter, yeah. So but opinions, yeah. So, and if somebody is on the side of imperialistic warmongering, I totally reject this person, of course. It doesn't matter if online discussion or in personal life. But if I see that there is a clear, open-minded, and, you know, collective responsibility is a huge word, yeah, but of course it's important to, if you live in a democracy, if you live in Western Europe, for instance, that you speak up, yeah, that you say, okay, not in my name, yeah. And if somebody refuses to do it without having a family, which he or she is afraid about, because I also understand that, then I think it's okay to ask the question, what do you think about that? Because that is not okay. So it's a very complicated issue, but I think, and I agree, and many Ukrainians also agree, that we need a more pragmatic approach, because this could be actually very helpful because of the knowledge, and also people listen to them because they know the system from within, and that can be a very useful force for the future.
Mr. Klitschko, you know, I talk with many Europeans this day, and let's say have my own impression. Get my own impression, yeah, what is happening in the European Union right now. And from my perspective, what I actually see, that there are countries, yeah, like Moldova, which is not a member of the European Union, but which is close to the European Union, like Romania, Baltic states, which are really afraid of potential Russian invasion. And, you know, I captured this not from the media, you know, I captured this from the dialects. Obviously, you know, they rely on statistic. I did not conduct, you know, polls, but this is what I feel in the air, yeah? So people are concerned about the situation. At least they're concerned because they feel prices rose, and they, you know, feel this and sense this tense, you know, tension. At the same time, you have Western European states which did not have a negative experience with Russia, or at least they had it several centuries ago. And at the same time, we're talking about the single European Union. So what is your perspective from the pan-Europe movement? So movement which actually is more about culture, is more about single vision. Is still European Union and Europe coherent from the point of, let's say, receiving the same threats, how they tackle the same threats, how they understand the same threats? Is, let's say, there is the same sensitive approach, sensitive overview about Russia in the whole European Union, not only in the border states which experienced, let's say, Russian invasion during the last century?
What I would say, the sensibility changed and moved and is higher now, because all those who believed in the rational thinking also on the Russian side before this full-scale invasion 1 year ago, they failed. They had to experience that those who came with the worst case scenario were right finally. And yes, of course, there are still people who don't believe that this war could be expanded into Moldova or into the Baltic states or wherever, Georgia, etc., etc. But those who see, especially in politics, because they have also the experience in talking with Russian politicians, etc., they see, or they are sensible enough to see that we have to calculate with a worst case scenario. Worst case scenario means, yes, of course, it's possible that Putin tries to organize a putsch in Moldova. Why not? It is possible and it happens already that Putin is going to instrumentalize Russian minorities in the Baltic countries. It is possible that Putin uses Serbia to create some kind of troubles in the so-called Western Balkans. It is a fact that Putin via Serbia tried to organize a putsch in Montenegro. So we have a lot of facts, and in politics, I think you have to work with facts that show that we have to be aware that there is a danger coming from the east.
Mr. Fechtinger, you just came from Albania, yes, far as I understand. Yeah, you just traveled today from Albania, and Albania is one of the states which actually would like to join the European Union.
Absolutely.
And we see that today, I think Mr. Vučić, the leader of Serbia, he announced that they are going to introduce sanctions against Russia, so solidarize with the European Union, even though Serbia has traditionally very strong links to Russia. So what is about Albania? Do we see the same bold approach among candidate states towards Russian invasion into Ukraine?
Look, Albania is a NATO country, and you can rely on all the NATO countries, like also Macedonia and Montenegro. These are really your friends and allies, and they stand with Ukraine in these very, very difficult moments. But there is differentiation. For example, Macedonia has signed a letter for Ukraine NATO membership. Very good. And Montenegro has signed the letter, the presidential letter, for Ukraine in NATO. Very good. Yeah? Unfortunately, Albania has not signed it. Yeah? And here you come again, you know, the socialists in Albania, they are not so much solidarity. When you go to many European capitals, you see a lot of Ukraine flags. In the socialists in Albania have no Ukraine flags at the public buildings, at the presidential palace, prime minister. No, this is not so good. And here's this link via Serbia and via, unfortunately, there's a little bit of a socialist alliance here. And that's very regrettable in my view. As well, I was also now calling in Albania for the Albanian defense industry to mobilize massively for the Ukraine war effort and for your ammunition crisis. From the communism time, they have huge ammunition factories in Albania. They could be at full production capacity to supply Ukraine now. That would be very good because they are from the communist times. They know exactly what to produce for the Soviet Union equipment. But unfortunately, no. And I'm quite critical to that one. Whenever, in principle, you know, the solidarity is very strong and there's help and everything, but also the poorer countries of the Balkans should do much more for Ukraine at this moment. Same, by the way, as Austria, because we are hiding behind neutrality, and that's very negative. Because what Ukraine really needs, when we don't intervene like we did for Kosovo, we intervened militarily for Kosovo. It was the right thing to do. We liberated. It was good. In Ukraine, we say we don't move with our soldiers. We don't really help you physically. Okay, then at least we have to send enough money and enough weapons to give you the opportunity to defend yourself. And that's the minimum we have to do when we believe in our values. Yeah, the normal thing in such a situation would be to help a European ally and to go in. But okay, Russia has nuclear weapons and everybody is afraid. We don't do that. But from the heart and from the emotions and from the values, how can we breach European values if we don't defend each other? It's so wrong. So we must do more. And Albania obviously is doing good, but could be much better. And there is need for improvement. And by the way, Kosovo, recognize Kosovo, please, Ukraine. I have put the flag extra for you. Do you understand the message, please? I hope. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Mr. Pichler, I would like to pose you the following question as a, let's say, good acquaintance of Ms. Tikhanovska, yeah, the leader of, let's say, President-elect of Belarus. Yeah, let's say President-elect of Belarus. At least Europe tried to recognize her as a president-elect. Anyway, I don't put her on the same foot as Ms. Zurabishvili, the president of Georgia, but it's a very strange position which I hear from Georgia and partially from Belarus. From Georgia, as you know, Ms. Zurabishvili she suggested that if there will be a peaceful agreement between Russia and Ukraine, obviously it has to include the liberation of Georgian territories. It's really funny. So Ukraine has to fight and has to lose Ukrainian heroes, Ukrainian soldiers, in the sake of liberating Georgian lands. It's really funny. Pretty much the same we hear from Ms. Tikhanovska. So basically, there is great moments for all politicians. Some politicians, they exploit them, some don't use them. So it seems to me that Ms. Tikhanovska, she can't utilize, let's say, this situation for her, because for her, this is the right moment to act, to show that she's a true leader of Belarus. Let's say that she is a new De Gaulle, of our era, So why we see, let's say, such inactive position of Ms. Tikhanovska, and pretty much the same from the perspective of Georgian authorities?
So first of all, I need to clarify, I'm not a good acquaintance. I just met her once and she supported our events sometimes with videos. I also met Ms. Tsepkalo thanks to also the events of Mr. Kluchek, who gave me the opportunity to talk more to her and to all the opposition movements. So there are several leaders, important figures. And I know the community quite well in Vienna. And I think it's a very, very difficult question. So politically wise, I don't dare to analyze because it's very complicated. I remember before last year, I think it was winter 2021, there was already a kind of idea not to mix the topics, to be very careful. There is this topic and then there's another topic. This country, that country. I don't agree with it at all. I would just suggest, and I understand all your arguments, of course, especially this Georgian thing. I was in Georgia, by the way, a couple of months ago, and the situation there is quite tense, because of several reasons, because of political leadership and also of many people from the neighbor country. I think we need a very, very pragmatic approach because the situation is so difficult not to divide common opinions. So if we agree about the big picture, and I think that everybody who is on the democratic side agrees with the big picture, then we should try to cooperate as good as possible and do not wash dirty laundry in public. If we analyze certain things and such, I'm totally agree, but we should just try to maintain, or I suggest to try to maintain. But I know if you're involved and if you hear certain statements, then it's very easy to get provoked. I totally understand it, but I prefer, or I suggest, a pragmatic approach because the cause is so important, and what how important this Mr. Lukashenko is, this Batka, that this is very much connected also to Putin, and so it should be a common cause, even if I know, I repeat myself, that it's very sometimes difficult to swallow if you're totally involved and other people say we are all same victims on the same stage. That's of course not true. I understand that emotions.
Well, I don't try to be too emotional because I understand politics and I'm very, let's say, I try to be very straight with the politics, not to fall into great emotions. When I'm talking about Ms. Tikhanovska, I'm talking most of all about her political talent, because from my perspective, this war was a chance for her. This war was a chance for her to reposition herself in Europe, elsewhere. But what I actually see is that, unfortunately, sorry to say this, that many Belarusian oppositioners, many Russian oppositioners, they capitalize their position. They like to live in Europe. They want to absorb in Europe. They don't want to be involved in the power distribution. They know that they won't be the one who will, let's say, take piece from the pie once these regimes will fail. And what we see right now is actually a kind of game. When we suggest that Tikhanovskaya is the president-elect, these people are Russian oppositioners. Like today, during the Munich conference, look, organizers invited Mr. Khodorkovsky, Ms. Navalny, Ms. Nemtsova, etc., Dmitry Gudkov. Well, I appreciate Mr. Nemtsov input in defense of Ukraine, etc., etc., etc. But let's be straight. These people won't be participating in power distribution. The same is about Ms. Tikhanovskaya. So maybe this is a great problem that we cannot look in the eyes of truth and say that these people, they work for money, they work for popularity, but this is not about the power. This is not about the desire to have a power, to get the power. Like, for instance, I don't know, Lenin at the beginning of the 20th century.
If I can reply that, I think it's quite unrealistic at the moment. I agree. Nevertheless, I think communicating the cause, delivering information, first-hand information is, you know, that I speak a lot about information. I think this is crucial because people are not informed. Also, people who are in general supportive do not have the facts. They're not ready for arguments. So this is very good. They should do it. But if we have the illusion that this is a power transfer, or that, I mean, it's different with Russian and Belarusian opposition. It's not the same, of course, but I don't think it will gonna happen soon. But we will never know, like we mentioned before, we will never know what is tomorrow. So maybe she's gonna do something or somebody else. So, but we should not be in my personal opinion. I don't know. I never thought that it's gonna happen soon.
Thank you, Mr. Kluchik, Mr. Vettlinger. Closing remarks, please, Mr. Kluchik.
Well, let me say thank you for the invitation, and let's hope that the Western countries are strong enough to support Ukraine so that Ukraine can defend its country and end this war as soon as possible with much support from the European countries. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Kluchik. Mr. Vettlinger, before you start, actually, you know, my favorite question, which I'd like to pose to you, what is your, let's say, score in dismantling Russia, since you participated in this great event in the European Parliament about dismantlement of Russia? So I'm just wondering, let's say, how is the progress? I don't hear you. Please, in a microphone. Yeah.
And the most important priority is Ukraine to join NATO. This is the absolute priority, because this is the key for sustainable peace. Yeah. So that's my wish. That's also what really needs to be the outcome: the liberation of Mariupol, and then the NATO membership of Ukraine and the defense of Ukraine. And the result of these measures will be, obviously, that in Russia will be a big crisis, because this war is ultimately about Western integration of Ukraine. So if Ukraine joins the West now, which on the EU side we have decided now, and it's going to happen, which joins also NATO, then the question is really what happened with this war? Why this war? And it's a complete failure. We don't need to attack Russia, but we just need to get Ukraine fully in NATO, because the result of this will be the defeat, the moral, political, and strategically defeat of Russian leadership from 2000 to 2023. And this will then set into motion. And I'm calling here also for the Belarusian debate. We need now to set in motion simultaneously revolutions in Belarus. Also, there must be a better pro-European policy in Georgia and in Moldova, meaning also to push for NATO membership. And the Russian opposition must simultaneously now prepare in the spring of 2023 a Russian spring. And it must be at all different regions of the future 36 states. And, you know, how can Russia suppress all regions at once? And there are very brave people in Russia. Mostly they have left now. They really want to have independence, and we should support them the same like we supported Kosovo, like we supported Bosnia, Croatia, and Slovenia. We should support them. And they are there at this conference. They were there. There are thousands of people who dream now of freedom, and maybe it's not as realistic, but if we support them, they can be free, and they will be free, because the whole system of Putin will crash down like a house of cards in 2023, once Ukraine is in NATO, because all his terrible lost 120,000 or 40,000 people already, the huge costs for the Russian economy, the whole system he has built up will crash into the abyss. And then we have to be ready. We need to learn this name of the new states from Karelia to Buryatia. And we have to encourage them. I say it's also possible, maybe there will be a kind of free federation. It's also possible. But such an autocratic empire east of us is not in our strategic interest. And we have to work with the opposition to train them. And I say yes to the opposition, yes to this movement, yes to independence. And we do it the same like with the Soviet Union. We recognize them when they disintegrate. Same like in Yugoslavia. And if we help them, we can avoid many wars, because we help them to settle the borders with our political process in the OSCE and in the Council of Europe. They all can join the Council of Europe. They can all join the OSCE. They can all come back into the normal European framework of peace and security, which we have. And many of them, we will give free trade agreements, and we will treat them like the countries of former Soviet Union and former Yugoslavia. And it's a very good scenario. And I really work on that this will happen. And I appeal for everybody to learn these names of the new states, because they will come, and nobody should be surprised if Siberia is independent. And then we will say, oh, it's absolutely what the people there want.
Mr. Feckenegger, thank you very much. And dear colleagues, thank you very much. I just want to remind that today with us was Mr. Reinhard Plutchik, who is serving as the Secretary General of Austrian Division of Pan-European Movement, Mr. Günther Feckenegger, who is the Chairman of the European for Tax Reforms, who is a strong supporter of dismantling Russia to the newly established 34 states.
And a strong supporter of Ukraine recognizing Kosovo.
Yeah, of Ukraine recognizing Kosovo. And Mr. Dietmar Pichler, who is serving as a programmatic director of Austrian Institute of Information. Thank you very much, and Austrian Institute for Media Literacy. Thank you very much, colleagues, for this interview. Thank you very much, the audience, that you have been with us for so long. And I wish all of you peace. Thank you.
Slava Ukraine.
Героям слава.
Stay safe. Good night. Thank you for everything.
Thank you very much. I will send you the link today in the evening. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye, guys.